So I'm very happy to be here. I drove down from Glendale, California, which is not so far. It's not like going 3,000 miles across the United States, but it's a bit of a trip. And I really appreciate you having me here. I first wanted to acknowledge some interesting people that are part of your group, the Kiwanis Club. That's the president, Jerry Dubar. I wanted to thank him for having me. Also, Chief Rodriguez, I wanted to thank you for coming. Dennis Parrott, who was in touch with me about coming to speak. And also, Luisa Ruiz, with Youth Services, who has been distributing the Way to Happiness book. So how many people here have children or grandchildren? Raise your hands. Wow, that's great. Okay, excellent. And how many people who have children or grandchildren who have never had any problem with your kids or their friends? All right, one person, yay! Notice I said, or their friends, okay? Because many times you're raising your kids right, and then they have these other influences. So I became part of the Way to Happiness, and I actually raised my 3 daughters with this book because they had friends, and they would do interesting things. I'll just call them interesting, okay? But I found out something interesting about your group, the Kiwanis Club, that made me really, really like what you do. Would you like to hear it? Okay, this is what I found out. The Kiwanis Club was founded in 1915 in Detroit, land of cars and Motown, Michigan. Did you know that? Also, Kiwanis, the actual word, is borrowed from Native American Kiwanis, which means we trade or we trade our talents. Did you know that? Awesome, very smart. And then the purpose of this group, which I really, really like, is good kids into exceptional adults. Now I like that word exceptional because it means that you're above the norm. And that's what we really need in this world. We need people who are above the norm, who are exceptional, who stand out because of the qualities they have. So you have a very large number of members. There are 600,000 members of the Kiwanis Club. That's a lot of people. 8,000 clubs in 96 countries. So give yourselves a hand. Now the objectives, the 6 objectives and how they relate to the Way to Happiness was very fascinating to me. I got completely fascinated with this. But before I go into that, I want to bring up something that happened with your projector, if you don't mind. Somebody who's obviously not a member of the Kiwanis Club, obviously not a member, just, you know, during the vacation of the holiday season, decided to take the projector without saying, by the way, I need a projector and I'm going to take it. I'm not going to give you money for it, I'm not going to tell you where I put it. So there's something in the Way to Happiness book that actually covers people who steal stuff. Did you know that? This is the most fascinating thing to me about this book. And I'll tell you what page it's on in just a moment. Okay, and then you can turn to it yourself and find out what I'm finding out. And then I'll tell you a little story related to my oldest daughter. Reasons why people steal. Did you know that? Only 2 reasons. Not 3, not 5, only 2. It says at the very last paragraph, stealing is really just an admission that one is not capable enough to make it honestly, or that one has a streak of insanity. Ask a thief which one it is. It's either one or the other. So if the person could afford a projector, then it must be a streak of insanity. If they couldn't afford it, then maybe it's they can't afford to get things honestly. So here's my little story. My daughter Deanna was going home from school. We were living in Boston at the time. She was taking the T. They don't call it the subway, they call it the T. I think it stands for Metropolitan Transportation Authority or something. And there were 2 bums there asking for money. And because of the way I raised my daughters, you'll understand this next part. So one of the bums says, oh, can you give me $1? So my daughter said, well, if you clean up some trash over here, then I will give you $1. So I always told her she could earn any money she wanted to. So one bum started cleaning up the trash. The other one said, I'm not going to clean up trash. And he just ripped $1 out of her hand. So she got very upset. She went down to the transit police and told them what happened. They came upstairs. This guy had done this before. And the police, you know, apprehended him. And then they actually drove my daughters home, which they were extremely excited about driving home in a police car. And so, my husband was not so excited when he saw his daughters getting out of the police car. But that's another story. So fast forward 2 years later. Oh, by the way, this guy had to go to court I don't know how he got a lawyer or anything like that, but he had to go to court. My daughter went to court, and she took the Way to Happiness book with her. And when they were talking about what happened and did he steal the money, and he had done this before, my daughter said, well, there's a reason why people steal. Do you mind if I read this? Now, she was 15 at the time, but she used to wear suits all the time, so people thought she was like 18 or 19, right? So they said, okay, you can go ahead and read it. So she reads it. And so the guy, the thief guy, he says to the judge, can I have that book? And he says, well, yeah, go ahead, you can have it. So she gives him the book. 2 years later, my daughter's going to the same subway, and she sees this guy out of the corner of her eye selling newspapers. And she kind of looks. He looks a little familiar. And sure enough, it was the guy. And he somehow decided to make it honestly. Interesting, eh? People can change their own minds. That's what this book is about, changing your own mind. So here we go. So the 6 objectives of the Kiwanis Club start with to give primacy to the human and spiritual rather than the material values of life. So that means to set it above, set the human and spiritual above the material. And the Way to Happiness, all of the precepts in the book, 1 through 21, cover that. Number 2 is to encourage the daily living of the golden rule in all human relationships. Now this is sometimes harder to do than you would think. But the golden rule, as we know, is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? Well, there's 2 versions of that in this book. The first one is chapter 19, which is try to treat others as you would want to be treated. And 20 is try not to do things to others you wouldn't want them to do to you. Now, I picked out some things in 21 because chapter 20 has actual virtues. Who do you usually associate virtues with? Is it usually people or saints or gods? Do you usually associate virtues with people? Great. This is above average smart group. Okay, because that's true. So I picked out a couple of these virtues that I thought were kind of interesting, and I'm on page 62 if you want to follow along with me. The first one I picked up is the first one they mentioned, because I think there's 21 virtues here. It says you would possibly, first of all, want to be treated justly. You wouldn't want people lying about you or falsely or harshly condemning you, right? That's the first thing. Then there's another one that says you would want people to be fair in their dealings with you. You would want them to be honest with you and not cheat you, correct? So the author is actually asking a person, would you like to be treated this way? Because you can't really assume, somebody might say no. Then it says, instead of blasting you, you'd probably want others to exhibit self-control, right? Have you ever been in a situation where you did something and you really annoyed somebody or really pissed them off and they were ready to blast you? Perhaps if they read this, it would be a little bit better for you. Or for them if that was happening to you and them. And then another one I chose was if you had any defects or shortcomings. Does anybody in here have any defects or shortcomings? Okay, not alone. Thank you. Okay. So if you had any defects or shortcomings, if you made a mistake, you might want people to be tolerant, not critical. This is kind of cool when it comes to dealing with children as well. Because they make mistakes, they do silly things, they're not fully caught up with everything you're supposed to do and the consequences of one's actions. And if you treat kids this way, when they have defects or shortcomings, it's much easier for them to be more respectful to you as an adult or a grandparent. I did this with one of my daughters. She decided to forge my husband's signature on her driving permit, learner's permit. Don't ask me why. And so the security officer there at the DMV saw this. She didn't think he saw her do it. And she went there and she noticed she needed an adult signature, so she went off to the side, scribbled something down and went back, and he was like, I saw you do that. So he said, normally I would send you home and 6 months later you would come back, but you look like you have an honest face. So you can take a new application, go home, get your actual parent signature and come back. She's like, okay. So I said, Mari, what happened? I thought you were getting your driver's permit today. She says, well, I forgot to get your signature and I forged it. I'm like, oh, really? Forged the signature? Interesting. So I pulled out this book and I had her read the chapter, Don't Do Anything Illegal. And she read it and she said, oh. So I said, you get it? You understand? She says, I get it now. I said, okay, cool. That was the end of it. I didn't have to yell at her. I didn't say, that was stupid, or why did you do that? Now you can't drive. I didn't have to go there. I just showed her this. This book is a great learning tool, both for the parent and for the kids. And so she did get her license. She's a great driver, and that was the end of that. She learned the lesson. So So now the next one is to promote the adoption and the application of higher social, business, and professional standards. Oh my goodness. I read that and I thought, what? Really? I can think of so many instances where people needed to apply this. To promote the adoption and application of higher social, business, and professional standards. Okay, so I went to the local post office, and it was, I think it was around the holiday time, so with lots of lines. And it was time for somebody to go on their break. And, you know, and I was the next one to go. She's like, oops, time to go. And I was like, can you just do it? You know, some businesses, they just don't service you well. Now, I have to say for this particular post office, that was an exception, because most of the time they're very, very good with their service. But sometimes you go places and they're not so good with the service. So sometimes you're flying on an airline and you get really good service, and sometimes not so good. And so if every person and every individual who works for a company, works for yourself, you know, works for other people, would apply this to promote the adoption and application of higher social, business, and professional standards, man, oh man, we'd be all happy campers. I think so. Then the next one is to develop by precept and example a more intelligent, aggressive, and serviceable citizenship. How'd you guys come up with this? This is like amazing. No wonder nobody changed this in 90-something years. It's total common sense. A country is only as strong as its individual citizens. I'm going to say that again. A country is only as strong as its individual citizens. You know? And so if you're not teaching, if you're not promoting strength, moral strength, making the right choices in your individual citizens, don't get upset with the police department, right? Do not get upset with the police department, because it doesn't start with the police department, it starts at home and the community. Okay, so I'll give you a nosy Caralyn, Percy, New York type attitude situation that happened to me today. I was getting in my car in a parking garage, and a guy had some paper cup, he drank some coffee, and he just threw it out his window into the parking garage. I'm like, what? So very politely, because I don't want to get into a fight with anybody, I'm coming here, I'm dressed really nicely, I don't want to come with scuffs and stuff on my face. So I said, wow, I said, you just dropped that. He says, yeah, you know, I don't know where the garbage is. I said, it's right over there. He says, somebody will pick it up. I said, wow. I said, you know, really, you should pick it up. He says, somebody will pick it up. I said, okay, I'll be that somebody. So when I started walking towards his garbage, he's like, oh, okay, fine, I'll pick it up. And then instead of just leaving it at that, I said, thank you so much. And so now he didn't feel like a jerk or something throwing it out the window, you know. But it's like, that's our environment. If you have a place too dirty, the criminals start moving in because they see nobody cares about this place. And it's an individual small situation, but you know, it's something an individual can take responsibility for. But how you do it has to be sometimes careful, because you don't want to get in a fight with people because they drop garbage. I mean, I've done it myself, I'm not perfect. And so, and then the next one is to provide through Kiwanis clubs a practical means to form enduring friendships, to render altruistic service, and to build better communities. This one I really, really like as well. Because enduring friendships are so important. How many people in this room have had a friend for like 40 years? Great. How many people have had a husband or wife for 40 years? These are enduring friendships, you know? How about 20 years for the younger people in the crowd? Okay, 10 years. Yeah, you know? It's like so cool. They're having a conversation. There we go. See, they're being friends. I have a friend who called me one time. I was at work. She says, Caralyn, I think you need to come to my house. I'm like, what? What's going on, Secret? I don't know. I ate something weird. I feel really weird. Oh my God, I'm at work. I just got here. I had a whole day. And she lives in Lockwood Center, which is like a half an hour away. So I said, okay, Sigrid, I'll come and help you. So I started talking to my, my senior, and I said, I have this friend. She said, do you have to leave now? I said, she sounded pretty bad, and she's my friend. And so she says, okay. So I called back to see, Sigrid, how's it going? She says, just the fact that you said you were willing to come, I feel a little bit better. She says, you don't have to come. I went, oh, yeah. But that's what friendship's for, it's enduring. And then how that relates to the way to happiness, I forgot to tell you that, is precept, let's see, we're on precepts 1 to 21. Now the last one I want to go over is to cooperate in creating and maintaining that sound public opinion and high idealism, which makes possible the increase of righteousness, justice, patriotism, and goodwill. I had to read that like 5 times because I thought, wow, that means you have to work with other people. That means you have to create things. You can't just wait for other people to do things. You have to maintain sound public opinion, you know, the opinion of the public about things. If there's something going on that you think is not right, you need to say something about it. You need to vote. You have to have high ideals. You can't be telling somebody to do something and you're doing something else. You can't be drinking and driving. You can't be allowing your kids to do that. You know, you can't see a coworker who's having a problem and not try to help them, which makes possible the increase of righteousness, justice, patriotism, and goodwill. So if you do all those things, then the other things are possible. That's a lot of work. You know, it's a lot of work. It means that you yourself have to be strong in all the different things you have going on. And if you have frailties or you get sick or things like that, and you can't handle all the things you need to handle, other friends need to maybe come to your aid. So this is a very, very strong group. You have very, very strong principles. And the way to happiness meshes perfectly with these principles. Now the last thing I want to go over before I show you a chapter called Love and Help Children, because this group is all about helping the future, which is our children, our young people. This is something that's going on in the world, in Paris, right now, and it has to do with respect the religious beliefs of others, on both sides. Now I'm going to give you the Caralyn Percy opinion of the situation. Okay, do you mind? Okay. I think if you do something that upsets another person religiously, you say something, you print something, and you stir them up and upset them, you know that if you put this thing out there, it's probably going to upset this huge part of the world that follows this particular group. It's not really a good thing to do. At the same time, the book says do not murder. And so no matter how upset you get about what somebody says or does or prints about your religious beliefs, it doesn't mean that you can then go forward and murder somebody as a result. So there's harm on both sides. But this is what it says about respect the religious beliefs of others, and that's on page 57. And I'm just going to read some of it. It starts with tolerance is a good cornerstone on which to build human relationships. When one views the slaughter and suffering caused by religious intolerance down all the history of man and into modern times, one can see that intolerance is a very non-survival activity. Now this is the part that made my eyeballs go, Mwah, like the cartoons I used to watch when I was a kid. It's on the next page. It's on page 58, near the top. If all the brightest minds since the 5th century BC or before have never been able to agree on the subject of religion or anti-religion, it is an arena of combat between people that one should do well to stay out of. Oh, all the way back then, they still haven't solved this problem. What do you know? You know? And so when I meet somebody of a different religion or a different faith, if I don't know about it or I have some opinion about it, I can at least be tolerant. I can be respectful. And maybe I'd like them to treat me that way too, based on what my religious beliefs are. And then he says something else that's very, very interesting. And this is further down. He says, man since the dawn of the species has taken great consolation and joy in his religions. Even the mechanist and materialist, these are people who just believe in materialism and not spiritualism, of today sound much like the priests of old as they spread their dogma. Men without faith are a pretty sorry lot. They can even be given something to have faith in. But when they have religious beliefs, respect them. So this is really, really important, you know, and what's happening around the world is I think that there should be more understanding, first of all, and also differentiation between individual actions and a whole group. Because I'll give the police as an example, and I don't think the chief will mind this. You know, you have different examples of police doing funky things they shouldn't be doing. Very small percentage, I might add, extremely small percentage. And yet all the police officers who every day go out, risk their lives, do amazing things, you don't hear about these spread across the news, do you? Not the way you hear about the other stuff, you know? There was a police officer in Flint, Michigan, who was off duty, and somebody dropped some stuff off of his car when he was driving down the highway. The police officer kind of risked his life a little bit to get this guy's, materials that fell off the truck that he didn't even realize that happened, to get it back to the guy, and didn't even say what his name was, That's a good news story. Or what about police that prevent people from, killing themselves? Sometimes you have suicide people that a policeman will step in and prevent that from happening. Or he goes to a house and protects a woman or a husband from killing each other, And so these are stories that we should be hearing about all the time to balance out the very small percentage of the funky things they have no business doing. So I just want to give the policemen here a big hand because they do amazing work for us. And they don't ask to be acknowledged, so we have to promote them ourselves, okay? So now, the last thing I actually wanted to tell you about before I show you a chapter of a film, it's 7 minutes long. How much do you want time?
Got about 3-4 minutes.
3 or 4 minutes? Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to have to launch into this right away. This is a chapter from the film, The Way to Happiness. It has to do with children. I want you to check it out and see what it says.